shower or thunderstorm, 22. Rotorua, showers from late morning with thunder, 21. Gisborne, Napier and Hastings, cloud at times and 22. Taupo and Taumarunui, partly cloudy. Showers from late morning with thunderstorms, 22 the high in Taupo, 24 for Taumarunui. New Plymouth, mainly fine, possible evening shower, 22. Whanganui and Levin, fine by afternoon, 24. Palmerston North and Kapiti, cloud clears this morning, 23. Masterton becoming mainly fine, but there's still the chance of a shower from late morning, 23. Wellington, morning low cloud, then sunny and 21. Blenheim, cloud morning and night, 22. Nelson, fine from afternoon, 21. Westport, Greymouth and Hokitika, fine, but some cloud tonight, 21. Kaikoura, morning low cloud and a few spots of drizzle, then fine. Cloud again tonight, 19 degrees. Christchurch has cloud morning and evening, 22. Ashburton, Timaru and Oamaru, fine apart from morning cloud, and again tonight, Ashburton 23, 21 the high for Timaru, 20 in Oamaru. Wanaka, Queenstown and Alexandra, morning cloud clearing to fine, but the chance of an afternoon shower, thundery in Alexandra. 24 the high in Queenstown, Wanaka and Alexandra get to 26. Dunedin, cloud morning and night, 20 degrees. Invercargill, some morning cloud or fog, otherwise it's fine and warm and a high of 23. It's 23.5 minutes to 8.
And it's Morning Report, and as we've been reporting this morning, from the middle of next month, foreigners wanting to buy more than 5 hectares of rural land will have to prove to the Overseas Investment Office that they will deliver tangible benefits to the country. At the moment, the office only gets involved in the sale of pretty large farms. These are sheep and beef farms over about 7,000 hectares, or dairy farms close to 2,000 hectares. The Associate Finance Minister, David Parker, has announced these changes, and he joins us now. Good morning, Minister.
Good morning.
Does this mean that pretty much any farm, any commercial farm that is sold to a foreigner would have to go through the Overseas Investment Office?
That's true, and that is actually the existing situation. Even small farms have to apply, but until now it's only the very large ones that have had any real scrutiny.
Right, so that's when you look at the issues such as providing jobs or technology or other benefits that we might not otherwise get.
That's right. You know, we've got a view that it's a privilege to own New Zealand land, and that if someone from overseas is going to effectively outbid a New Zealander, they've got to be bringing something pretty special. All too often they employ a New Zealand farm manager, they use New Zealand farming systems, and there's no material increase in the output, there's no further processing. And in that sort of situation, we just don't think there's enough upside to justify flogging off New Zealand land to foreigners.
So what will a foreigner have to prove to the OIO under your changes that they wouldn't have had to under the current ones?
Well, an example might be that they have to satisfy the government through the official, the Overseas Investment Office, that they're going to, for example, do something new and more productive on the land. For example, if it was horticultural land, bringing a new plant variety to the country that can't otherwise be grown, or bringing some further processing of primary produce that's going to lead to higher value exports.
So you're not banning foreigners from buying this land at all. You're just saying to them, if you can provide something we want, then go for it.
Yes, but I would make the point that most of the current applications would probably, and I don't mean the current ones actually in the system, but most of the applications that have been approved in recent years wouldn't meet these new criteria.
So have you got an estimate or an assessment about how many fewer would be approved under your regime?
No, I don't have an exact figure, but I would say the majority would not be.
The majority of applications that are made for foreigners to buy rural land in New Zealand would be declined under this regime? The
majority of those that have been approved in recent years would be. It's hard to tell how this new rule is going to change what people undertake to do for the benefit of New Zealand for the privilege of buying our rural land. But if assuming that there was no change in that behaviour, yes, the majority of those prior applications would be likely to be declined.
Okay, so between 08 and 15, and correct me if I'm wrong here, there were about 725 sales of sensitive land, only 11 declined. Does that sound roughly right? I'm going from...
That's right. That shows you what a ruse the last directive letter was, because it said to the Overseas Investment Office, look, only look at large farms and then they defined large farms as being 10 times the size of a normal farm of that size. And as you said, the average dairy farm is 200 hectares, and they're only looking seriously really at those that were 2,000 hectares.
Okay.
It was a fraud.
Yeah. So under the scenario where 700 odd applications are made, you're saying that majority of those would be declined under your regime?
I think over time there will be fewer applications. If there was an application that was just saying, look, we're going to employ a New Zealand farm manager to use New Zealand farm systems, then I really don't see the upside. Neither does the government. That's a view across New Zealand First, the Labour Party, and the support that we have from the Greens. And we all campaigned on this issue, that we think that one of the things you've got to be careful of in this world where you've got this explosion of wealth at the top end overseas is that you actually don't allow that, that huge accretion of wealth from overseas to change your local markets for land.
Well, let's talk about some of those people. The Bill Foleys of the world, an American a billionaire who's bought a lot of wine assets in the Wairarapa, or James Cameron, who bought assets there as well. Would those sorts of people still be making those investments under your regime? I
don't know the detail of the Bill Foley one. In respect of the James Cameron one, yes, because he was intending to become a permanent resident, and so he's entitled as a permanent New Zealander to buy. We're talking about people who haven't put roots down in New Zealand, who are not necessarily paying any tax in New Zealand, effectively coming in here and actually frustrating the ambitions of some New Zealander to go up the scale, whether it's a share milker trying to sort of graduate into owning a farm, or a wealthy New Zealander who wants to buy some beautiful property around a lakeside at the moment.
Let's move to that then. Yeah, let's move to that, because that comes down to price, a lot of that, doesn't it? If the ability for someone to move up in the world and to buy a farm depends on price, what impact is your assessment that will have on price? What impact will this have on the price of rural land? Well, it's axiomatic
that it will have some effect, because the additional demand must be pushing up prices at the margin. And indeed, a New Zealander generally only sells to a foreign buyer rather than a New Zealand buyer if they're being paid a little bit more. What does a little bit more mean? Well, we can't precisely measure that. The example that I've seen in the news in the last couple of days is a large South Island station being sold by Landcorp, where the backup offer from the New Zealand purchaser is 2% lower.
So do you have advice from officials who have estimated what impact this could have on rural land prices?
It's impossible to model, but given that the effect is on a small number of marginal transactions, it's unlikely to be a huge price. That's why I give the example of the backup offer there at 2% lower.
Yeah, but how can you have it both ways? If you say it's not really going to affect the price much, then how does it make it easier for a Kiwi to buy in?
Well, we're not saying that the majority of farms are currently sold to overseas buyers. We're not. We're just saying that the principle that an overseas buyer should be able to outbid a New Zealander without bringing something special to the country is wrong.
Okay, so, that's just a principle, though. I mean,
well, it's a very important principle to most New Zealanders.
So you've got your principle, but how does it help me if I want to buy a farm? If you're saying that the price isn't going to go down, I mean, it's nice to have the principle, I'm sweet with that, but how does it help me buy the farm if the price hasn't gone down?
Well, at the moment, every dairy farm that is purchased by someone from overseas is a dairy farm that is not available to be purchased by a New Zealander. I think the logic in that's pretty simple.
Okay, but the effect on price, negligible?
Yes, the marginal price is what causes it to sell for a higher price. The additional amount that's paid by a foreign buyer need not be very high in order for them to secure the contract.
So it won't be any easier then, really, for a New Zealander to buy a farm?
There's not going to be a huge increase in the number of share milkers increasing from, moving from share milker to farm owner, but there will be some.
So why are you doing it then?
Because as a matter of principle, it's important that people who put their shoulder to the wheel of the New Zealand economy are those that have the privilege of buying our productive assets, and that they not be outbid by 1%ers from overseas who come from low tax jurisdictions, who sometimes pay no tax anywhere, as the Panama Papers and other things have shown. And we think that if you're going to protect New Zealanders' attitudes to being outward looking, to being a trading nation without a backlash against trade and some of the things that come in from investment from overseas from these super wealthy people in the world, you've got to act to protect the interests of New Zealanders.
So it's really just a political manoeuvre then. It's what you're calling a principle, what others could call political rhetoric. It's not really going to have any effect.
Well, you might call that political, but I call that a value. And that's one of the values that the Labour Party, the New Zealand First Party and the Green Party share.
So why not do that with forestry as well?
Well, forestry is interesting because in a short period of years, a couple of decades ago, a large percentage of the non-Maori forests passed into overseas ownership, and they are already overseas owned. The big issue that we have in forestry is that we want further processing rather than the export of raw logs. So what we've said there is, and we also want to plant a lot more trees. So whereas we don't think there's any economic downside in tightening up foreign owners of dairy land, because we're really good at dairy processing with Fonterra and others. In respect of log processing, it's obvious that we need to do better because we're exporting too many raw logs.
Yeah, so what happened to your principles there? I mean, why would you allow foreigners to buy forestry land if it's the principle?
Quite frankly, sadly, the true case there is that the horse has bolted on a lot of forestry land, and so what we're trying to do is maximise the economic value of those forests for New Zealand by encouraging further processing.
Yeah. Well,
so
you could argue that the horse bolted in 2006 when you were in the cabinet, and it was the biggest year for rural land sales to foreigners. You allowed 600,000 hectares to be sold that year, the largest on record.
You could argue that. If you looked into the detail of that, you would find that that was the on sale from an overseas owner to another overseas owner.
So you dispute that was the biggest year of foreign land sales?
No, I don't. I'm making the point it was a huge forest. It was the Carter Holt forests that were already in overseas ownership. They passed through the ownership of Graham Hart, and then I think the next day was sold to another American investor. But in any event, I was minister at that time, and by the time I was minister for 3 years, I formed the view that we were far too laissez-faire in New Zealand about how easily we sold our land assets overseas.
You got it wrong.
Well, I was implementing the then law. I then, as a politician, caused the law to be changed.
Okay, thank you for your time this morning. To appreciate it, that's the Associate Finance Minister, David Parker. It's 13 to 8.